Okay. Since it is 6 o'clock, according to the cell tower, we'll call the Rolesville Planning Board meeting for September 26, 2022 to order. Welcome, everybody, once again. Quick item before we move on to the agenda, just a reminder for the board members, please make sure your microphones are turned on. That would be with the button up. Thanks. First item on the agenda, as always, is the Pledge of Allegiance. At this time, I ask everybody to stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Moss, if we could once again call on you for an invocation.
All right. Let us pray. Dear Lord, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come here together tonight and meet on behalf of the town. We'd also like for your blessing over this meeting, and we'd like to ask for your guidance and direction in the decisions we make. For us in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Next item up is review and approval of the minutes from the August 22nd meeting. Floor is open for motions for corrections or for approval.
Mr. Chairman, here no corrections or additions. I make a move to approve the minutes from last month's meeting.
There is a motion for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Minutes are approved, which brings us into the regular agenda. And first item up is case MA 22-07, 503 South Main Street. And I believe Mr. Moss.
I'd like to ask to be recused from this project. I'm a surveyor on this for their plan, so I'd like to ask to be recused from this project.
Okay, thank you.
Town attorney, remind me, it's been a little bit. Do we need a motion to allow him to
recuse?
He's informed us that he's going to be recused, and he's
Okay.
got a basis for it, so
That works.
he will be recused.
All right. Am I good here? Need to
No,
go?
you're not going to sit there.
Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mike Ellebarger, I'm a senior planner in the planning department. Before you here, item 1 is MA 22-07, a map amendment rezoning for 503 South Main Street. General information here is the property is currently zoned a mix of the residential low district and the R and PUD district, and the applicant is seeking to rezone the property to the general commercial zoning district under the town's land development ordinance. Quick orientation to this. Here is the site here on the east or south side of Main Street at Wall Creek Drive. It's currently a vacant property. A building was demolished there not too many months ago. Zooming in a little bit more, here's a better little aerial here showing Wall Creek Drive and South Main Street. This is almost literally right across the street from Town Hall. Again, the existing zoning of the property is a split between the residential low zoning district, which is per the newer adopted land development ordinance, and then some of it was also zoned, or is also zoned, the R and PUD, which dates to the unified development, the ordinance, the older ordinance that was usurped by the LDO. And these lines, after some investigation, do date back to old property lines. So the zoning districts, as you see there, the darker yellow and then the lighter yellow, go back to when different property lines existed on this. Future land use map identifies this tract and most tracts in this vicinity of South Main Street to be appropriate for commercial uses. The Main Street Vision Plan also supports rezoning to the general commercial district for the property. There's several principles and goals here noted that just generally support non-residential and primarily commercial and service type uses and zoning to perform that. On the transportation and traffic end, this rezoning being for the straight by right zoning district, there's no project entailed with this. The land development administrator, the planning director, has waived the traffic impact analysis requirement that typically would come with the rezoning application because there was no project to vet or have inputs in for a TIA. So that will be punted to the site development plan, and the applicant is currently processing a site development plan for the property, and that TIA process will be getting underway shortly if it is triggered. And also, the town and DOT have a Main Street improvement project that you're aware of called the LAP project, and this site will get some improvements coming out of that project, which hopefully will go to construction by the end of this year. And this is an exhibit here from some of those engineering plans, just to show some of the improvements that are going to occur on Main Street. The red line indicates the general property line of this property. Description of the general commercial zoning district. There's a wide variety of uses that are permitted by right and a small number that are permitted with a special use permit. The building height maximum is 35 foot. Building setbacks are 20 in the front, 15 sides, 35 in the rear. And when site development does occur, parking requirements, buffer yards, landscaping, screening, all of those will be provided in compliance with the LDO. The consistency request of this general commercial zoning rezoning is that it's predominantly, general commercial is the predominant zoning district on this area of South Main Street and aligns with the Main Street Vision Plan's goals and objectives, and thus the general commercial is consistent with the future land use category of commercial. So with all of that analysis, staff is recommending approval of map amendment 2207 and asks that the planning board also provide a recommendation. The applicant representative is here, should you have any questions for them. That concludes my presentation.
If the petitioner would like to.
Mr. Gettle or Matthew?
We really don't have anything to add to what
Okay.
Michael had there. It's pretty straightforward, and it does fit the parameters of future plans for the town of Rolesville. So,
Okay. Questions?
Do you have plans for the property?
we're working on in process on that. Yes.
Can you share with us what that is?
Well, it's I mean, right now we're looking at a potential mixed-use type of project that goes with the core village plan that's, we think.
You
would
wouldn't
a
be
good fit.
extending the storage facility out to the road?
No, no.
Mike, same question.
Got enough storage, right?
Just a quick curiosity, the property that's behind it, fencing, just things to think about in the future as far as how is that going to impact that neighbor, that specific neighbor that's there. Has that been addressed by chance?
We're looking, as a part of the site plan development, there'll be, I think there's a 10-foot type 1 buffer yard, and a fence is also, that's consistent with the LDO.
Gotcha. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself as well as far as entrance and exiting the site. Will any of that will any of that face Wall, is it Wall Street?
Creek.
Wall Creek?
Yeah, currently there is a access easement off of Wall Street that
Wall Creek,
connects.
okay.
Yeah.
Wall Creek.
Wall Creek.
Wall Creek Drive, sorry.
Wall Creek, yeah. And there's also, it ties in on the back. So there are two entrances that already exist on the property currently. And that'll, in all likelihood, remain consistent.
So there will be an access point on Wall Creek Drive?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Because this is a general rezoning case, the applicant is unable to commit to anything, and there's
Yeah.
no tool for us to limit. So in the board's review, you are looking at the entire ordinance as the plan could be anything that's permitted under the LDO.
Just to emphasize, it is the LDO, not the UDO
It
this
is,
time.
it is thankfully the LDO.
Has anybody expressed an interest in, okay. Well, board, discussion, more questions, motions?
Mr. Chairman, not hearing any further discussions, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we recommend approval of rezoning request MA 22-07 for 503 South Main Street.
We have a motion for a recommendation of approval. Is there a second?
Oh, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please give me an aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none? Thank you. Next item on the regular agenda for this evening is case MA 22-03, Parker Ridge rezoning. And Meredith?
Yes,
Welcome.
thank you. Good
The floor is
evening.
yours on this one.
And I love the color pink, but I just want to try something before I get going.
Oh.
Almost.
Just stay right there.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, I tried.
Almost.
Had to give it a shot. Well, it looks good on my screen. For your consideration this evening is a rezoning request for 86.89 acres located at 82 School Street, 120 School Street, and 201 Redford Place Drive. The applicant is proposing to change the zoning from residential low and residential and planned unit development to residential medium conditional zoning district and residential high conditional zoning district. There is a concept plan with 162 single-family lots and 114 townhome lots. And you can see Redford Place Park. Let me go. Pointer. Redford Place Park is located between the two sections, the townhome section and the single-family section. And again, as I mentioned before, there are 114 townhome lots proposed at a density of 3.93 units per acre, and 162 single-family lots at a density of 2.8 units per acre. And the average density of the townhomes and single-family together is 3.18 units per acre. The applicant is proposing a series of conditions. I believe there are 11 in total, and the applicant will be giving a short presentation this evening and can go over the conditions in more detail. But they include the concept plan, of course, some prohibited uses for the residential high section, a maximum number of dwelling units. One interesting condition is donating a single-family home to a veteran organization, including a pollinator garden and some architectural features. And there's also an offer to dedicate land labeled as Parcel A to the town of Rolesville. And I'll let the applicant go into more detail on that. As per our comprehensive plan, the future land use designation for the subject property is high-density residential. High-density residential includes a variety of housing types: single-family detached, single-family attached, duplex, triplex, multifamily. And the typical density range for high-density residential is 6 to 12 units per acre. And the current zoning for the subject parcels, the ones, since it's hard to see with the funky pink overlay, on this side, that is residential and planned unit development. So the pieces where the townhomes are going are currently zoned residential and planned unit development, or RMPUD. And then the area where the single family is going is currently zoned residential low. As per our community transportation plan, there are some key collector connections going through the property. Again, apologize since it's hard to see with the pink. The site is located here where it says site. And worth noting is this collector connection where I'm putting the mouse cursor from Main Street down to Virginia Water Drive and then across to Young Street. As per our 2022 Greenway plan, we've got some key greenways going through this area as well, and the applicant is showing those greenways on their concept plan. A TIA was performed for this project and resulted in one recommendation, and that is to construct the streets where the townhome portion of the proposed development is, one into each side, and that those streets would have a minimum 100-foot internal stem. So when we look at consistency with the comprehensive plan, and when I mention the comprehensive plan, I'm talking about the future land use, the community transportation plan, and I'm including the greenways in that as well. So the proposed housing types are consistent with the high-density category. The roadway network recommendations are reasonably illustrated, and I'll have a note in a minute to explain why I said just reasonably illustrated. And the greenways are shown as per the 2022 Greenway Plan. Where it might be a little less consistent, the proposed average density of 3.18 units per acre is less than high-density residential category of 6 to 12. That could be a great thing. Just wanted to point that out. And then the collector street design may function better if School Street is the dominant route. And here you can see School Street is here. And when I talk about being the dominant route, if the collector street runs from here all the way down to here, you want that route to be intuitive. And when it's the through route, it feels more intuitive than when it's opposite. So the T coming into that would make that collector street feel more prominent. So I recommend changing that, and staff also recommends removing condition 8 about perimeter buffers. That condition states that fences could be used instead of walls, and our ordinance does say we can't be less restrictive, and staff considers the fencing less restrictive than the walls. So at this time, I'd love to invite the applicant up to speak, and I have the slides already embedded in the presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I am Collier Marsh with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street here on behalf of the applicant. We do have a number of members of our development team here to answer any questions, civil engineers, traffic engineers, and representatives of Lennar, who is the developer for this project. So we are calling this Parker Ridge, and so we already went through the site, but just to familiarize everybody again, it's 4 parcels, about 88 total acres, an important location for the town, and we recognize that and want to make sure we get this project right. We're just south of Main Street. The existing street that goes through the site is Redford Place with that roundabout you can see in the middle, adjacent to some single-family neighborhoods as well as to the proposed town hall site as well to the east. So when we evaluate a site, we always look at what's allowed today versus what the future land use map calls for. What's allowed today is a little complicated. As Meredith pointed out, there are 2 districts that apply, and hopefully you can see some of the differentiation in color. This is the RPUD district. What's interesting about that district, it was part of a 2002 case that had special use permits that applied to it. Also, as part of that case was the Villages of Rolesville subdivision. We have not been able to definitively determine what was allowed on this portion of the property under that special use permit. So we've done some research and we've found some notes as to potential conditions, but we haven't found this is what needs to go here. So what that means is really any project is going to have to be rezoned for that portion of the site because there's an unknown there. And then on the right-hand side is the residential low-density district here. Future land use map, as Meredith pointed out, calls for high-density residential. And so we've tried try to bring a project that fulfills the future land use map designation, but also looks at the overall context of the site and provides compatibility with all of those different uses that are around us. And so what does that look like? So there are two zoning districts that we are proposing apply here. They align generally a little offset, but they align with the existing zoning districts. So the residential high-density district would be on the left-hand side. That's yellow for me. It's standing out as pink for y'all. And that's going to be a townhome district. Two product types permitted there, and they're shown on our concept plan where those go, but two different townhome types, both front load and rear load, which gives you that kind of more urban feel in certain locations. The RMC district, CZ district, so residential medium density, would be the single-family detached section of this project. So we have 11 conditions. Some of those are listed on the left-hand side here. Typical prohibition of certain uses that wouldn't be compatible with the surrounding area, essentially telling the town that we're proposing townhomes and single-family detached, capping the maximum number of units within each district. So in that RHCZ, a max of 120 townhome units. The concept plan comes in a little below that. Similarly, with the single-family detached section, a max of 170 units. And again, we come in a little below that in the concept plan. That concept plan is shown here, and this concept plan is a condition of the rezoning that we need to substantially conform with what's shown on the plan. And so some of the things that you can hopefully see with the colors on this are the differentiation in the housing types, and I'll show you those with the cursor. But here again is the high-density district where townhomes are going. This section here is a darker color. Those are front-loaded townhomes. These are rear-loaded here. With frontage on Redford Place and green space between. Purple again is front load, and then we have another, purple is rear load, front load, and then rear loads here and more front load. So mixture of product types within that section. Then you have your single family detached community. It may be hard to see with the contrast, but you can see these dotted lines going through the site, going all throughout it. Those are public greenways that connect all throughout the site. They will connect to the park, they will connect to the school, they will wrap the lake, they'll connect to the adjacent neighborhoods, and they'll connect to the future townhomes, town hall sites. So extensive greenways proposed, as well as extensive open space showing up as gray, and then some of the riparian areas in brown on this concept slide. So of our conditions, again, there are 11. One of those requires a donation of a home. So unlike an affordable housing commitment where you would sell a house at a reduced price, this is a donation, and a donation to one of several organizations that Lennar is partnered with. So they've partnered with Operation Coming Home, there's Operation Finally Home, and then there's the Wounded Warrior Homes Project. And so we have been talking with these groups, and we're trying to align that. So the way the conditions phrased right now is that it allows us to partner with one of them or a similar organization providing housing for veterans. And that home is given to a veteran and their family, typically a wounded warrior, as a free home to stay, and they own it. Pollinator garden was brought up as something that the town needs, that there's, with all the development going in, a loss of native species, a loss of pollinating species, and so we've committed to adding one of those. And so here is where it's located on the site. It's the size of several lots, and just blown up there so you can see it where we hit School Street. Architectural commitments, we have a number of commitments. Lennar built some of the homes in the neighborhoods behind, and those turned out pretty well, and we were asked, well, are you going to do something similar here? And so we added extensive architectural commitments for both the single-family homes and the townhomes to ensure that what you're getting is the consistent, high-quality product. So garage commitments, front facade commitments, material commitments to have a certain amount of masonry, and there's minimum patio sizes and things like that. And those apply both, they're separate listed, but there are conditions for both the single family homes and the townhomes. And what that gives you, these are representative elevations of the single family product types. There'll be differentiation among those, but these show some of the commitments. And you can't see, I guess, the contrast is tough for me to see. At least there is masonry in different elements, and where there's not predominantly masonry on the first floor, you have to have two siding types to have some visual interest. These are examples of the front load townhomes. Now these show one-car garages, but they will have a combination of 1 and 2-car garages. And again, you have differentiation between units, different colors, so that they look different and feel like separate homes. And these are representative elevations of the rear load. So again, you don't have a driveway in the front, you don't have a garage, you have an alley that serves in the back, and so it creates a nice pedestrian streetscape in front. I think there are some major public benefits that go along with this project, and they're summarized on this slide. The first one, this section right here, if you can see the difference in color, we are offering to dedicate 1.5 acres for a future park expansion. So this came up in some discussions that there's an interest in potentially having tennis courts across from your existing ball fields. And so we did a little study, and you could fit 2 tennis courts and parking right there across from the park, connected by greenway to the surrounding area. And so that would be offered to be provided to the town as part of this project. Not counting that 1.5 acres, there's 46.25 acres of open space preserved throughout that site. So that's pretty significant. It tells a lot of the story as to why the density may not be the max as to what you could put within the high density district, but it shows that there's an overall vision for this site and to have a more master planned community that's compatible with the surrounding area. So 46 acres of open space, not only just around units to create separation, preserving riparian areas, buffers between neighbors, and then this large lake here that's going to be amenitized as part of the project. We do have a clubhouse and pool, speaking of amenities, that's right here where that yellow star is. This, again, just for reference, is the pollinator garden. But I wanted to leave with this slide because this is a shot that Charlie took the other morning of the lake that's in the middle of that single-family development. You will have greenways wrapping around this, taking people, those connect directly to Town Hall, connect to the school, connect to the park. And so we thought this is a really unique feature and something exciting that can be accessed by the public as part of this project. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions. And again, we've got a number of folks here that can answer the more technical things.
On the potential park, the tennis courts and the greenways, are y'all just proposing deeding those, or are you going to actually build the tennis courts?
So the proposal at this point, we would build the greenways. The tennis courts was a more recent discussion. I don't know if they're finalized plans. We would be dedicating the land, and the town could use it as they see fit, but the intent would be for an expansion of the park.
I have a question. I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name, sir.
Collier Marsh.
Collier Marsh. Mr. Marsh, so one of the questions that I know that came up was regarding the school street access and it backing up, creating, backups related to school student drop-off, so carpool and things like that. Your response, or the response was you're working with the Wake County schools on that. How far along have you gotten with that?
Yeah, so Lennar has worked extensively with Wake County Schools and has made a number of accommodations for projects throughout the Triangle. And then one project I worked on, we ended up having a site for Wake County school, for a new school on it. So there's a good relationship with, I think it's Betty Parker's typically who we work with at Wake County Schools. And so when we brought this site to their attention, they said, great, we want to work with you. There are issues, but we need to get to a phase where we know what the plans are to be able to have a more definitive answer. So the short version is that we've been told is that the school would love to have us work with them to help resolve the problem, but we need to get to construction drawings so they know exactly what's filling in order to configure with their site. And so it's a good point because it brings up the comment in the staff report on that Collector Street alignment and the fact that what the plan calls for is the Collector Street to go right into School Street. And we're not opposed to that alignment, but under the current configuration, the fact that one of the comments we've heard is there are issues with School Street, we didn't think it was the best idea to run a collector street right into that in the current scenario. But the plans would allow us, as we get to the point with the school district, where if we can figure out some reconfiguration, whether it's wider lanes, more storage for cars in there, that if that's resolved and it aligns better with the entrances, that we could still provide the collector street in the form it's shown. But until that was resolved, we were reluctant to say collector street into the most notable problem that we heard.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was my only concern there. As it stands right now, obviously during the school season, not an issue with traffic, but parents are going to be collecting on that street, creating what's supposed to be a 3-lane, can hold 3 cars, will now be down to 1 lane for cars to get around. So those are just a little bit of a concern for me. And if that is going to be a collector street where cars are going to be moving back and forth on that, it could impede and really impact traffic there for sure, especially going in. What I mean by that is the backups that it creates in the mornings. Summers, I'm sure you're not going to have any problems. School is out. But those are just some things that I would like to see evaluated a little bit further and kind of see where the discussions end up with the school system.
Yeah, absolutely. We agree that we don't want to make that problem worse. We want to make it better.
Right.
And so we've initiated those discussions.
Excuse me, other questions from the board? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, we open up the floor for, nobody signed up, huh? Okay. No?
I want to say one last thing. Just to emphasize, I do have a concern with that collector street.
We will continue those
Noted.
discussions, and to the extent, if we could get an answer
Noted.
without construction drawings, we would have loved to have had that. But that's essentially, we want to work with you, but we need to know exactly what the plan is before we can invest in the
Absolutely.
engineering.
All right. Any other questions, comments?
Actually, I have a question for Meredith. Looking at the proposed connectors on this one, what's the best guesstimate right now for the town to start developing that parcel on Young Street for the,
I believe within 5 years,
okay,
just to start. I think some planning may be taking place sometime soon in the next several months, but as far as seeing something happen, 3 to 5 years.
okay.
I guess one comment I will say, make sure as I agree with Board Member Cross on that school street is already backing out onto South Main Street every day, every afternoon, every morning, so that's gonna be a major concern with this project. So I guess if that connector street did not go in and everything came in off Redford Place Drive, where would we be with that from a staff point of view? That's
If
gonna be-
we didn't have the school street connection and everything was coming in off of here, just to answer it fully and technically, we need to look at a traffic study, but just coming from a planning and site planning background, the more ways in and out you have, the better. Because, cars have
Yeah.
choices.
I believe that other connector street to the top right, that's one that's, I believe you were
Right-
referring to.
right here?
Young Street, right, yes.
Yes,
Yeah, when that opens up, that might help a bit.
sure.
Eventually, we would have, initially, we'd only have 2 entrances and exits or egress, egress, right? But when it's all said and done, we would have 5 into this property, right?
Sure. We have down to the south, so you can come in either way on Redford Place Drive, potentially School Street through Young Street,
Yeah.
potential to connect here.
So eventually, it'd be 5, right? Yeah.
I have a question for what's the build-out time from Lennar's perspective?
Evening, Charlie Oakley, Land Entitlements Manager with Lennar. We're projecting right now that land development would start in the spring of '24, probably looking at 10, 12 months of initial land development. So first home permits spring of '25, first CO maybe summer of '25.
And then once it's started, what's the completion time?
About 3 years.
So potentially, that connection to Young Street could be,
It would-
you're saying 5 years, Meredith, they could potentially be there.
Yeah, I was doing the math back there. 3 to 5 years would probably work out just about right.
Thank you.
I've got a question for you, Meredith.
Certainly.
So this plan at this point in time that we're looking at, this is just a concept plan?
That is
And-
correct.
And so once the construction drawings are submitted, that's when we would, or the staff would address any realignments of School Street as to that thoroughfare?
Yes, there would be additional review by the Technical Review Committee and more detail and engineering, obviously, with the construction infrastructure drawings.
Okay.
And also, well, actually, the next step after this would be a preliminary subdivision plat, and those also have more engineering.
Okay.
Any more comments or questions? Ready for a motion?
Yep. I'm not hearing any further questions or comments. I'd like to motion that we approve MA 22-03 for Parker Ridge rezoning.
We have a motion for a recommendation of approval. Is there a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of recommending approval, please give me an aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next case up is MA 22-06, 5109 Mitchell Mill Road. And
All right. Good evening again, Mike Ellebarger, Senior Planner, Planning Department. We have now MA 2206, a rezoning map amendment located at 5109 Mitchell Mill Road. A quick overview of the property here. It's roughly 140 acres located fronting on Mitchell Mill, but also bisected by Jonesville Road. The current zoning is Wake County's R30, so this property is not in the town city limits. It is not in the town ETJ at the moment. And the applicant is seeking to rezone this property into 2 districts, the residential medium density conditional district and the neighborhood commercial conditional district. This application comes forth with conditions and a concept plan with basic maximums of 398 total dwelling units, for which a maximum 134 could be townhomes, and approximately 8 acres of commercial land. Voluntary annexation will be required for this application eventually. That will catch up. Here is the concept plan that is included with this petition for rezoning. To generally orient you here, north is to the right, and you see Jonesville Road that bisects the project right here, basically creating an east and a west or a left and right portion. Mitchell Mill Road is running as such. To first look at the residential medium density district, again, this would be the one on the east side or the right side of Jonesville Road. Again, to orient you, Jonesville Road would be here. This is approximately 86 acres. This concept plan is laying out 191 lots. That is not an absolute, but this is how the applicant has shown to do that. They have shown the intention to do a cluster subdivision at the time of preliminary subdivision, which under the LDO allows them to modify lot widths and minimize setbacks. So that creates a more compact development lot. But by doing so, that also means you can preserve more land. And this cluster here would preserve 49% of the acreage from development. Moving then to the other side of the project, the neighborhood commercial conditional district, or on the west side, approximately 55 acres. And again, this concept plan is showing 69 single-family detached lots and 119 attached townhome lots. And here at the corner, an 8-acre non-residential or commercial node. Again, there are 7 conditions proposed with this request. One is general compliance with the concept plan and those ceilings of dwelling units, 398, and 134 of those could be townhomes. Delivery of recreational amenities as detailed in the conditions by the 150th certificate of occupancy. So that's 150 homes that could be occupied by residents before all of those recreational amenities would be delivered by the developer. Public greenways throughout the site as shown on the concept plan. Transportation improvements, which were determined through the traffic impact analysis process. They are couched in their conditions and also detailed in your staff memo. The single-family detached would have crawler stem foundations and a 2,000 square foot minimum. The townhomes would commit to 6 units per building. That's 2 less than the LDO minimum, or sorry, maximum, and a 1,200 square foot minimum size. And in that NC district, the 8-acre area, if multifamily were to be performed, they would be limited to only upper story. So a truly mixed-use building would have to be created with residential over commercial or retail. The future land use identifies this entire swath of the town of Rolesville's authority and jurisdiction as medium-density residential. As you see here in this, for me, it's orange. For you, it's hot red. And again, the current zoning is the Wake County R30, which is a very low-density residential district. This is not in the town's ETJ or town limits at this moment. And again, they're proposing the RMCZ and NCZC, though. So the residential medium and the neighborhood commercial both as conditional districts. Through the technical review committee analysis and review of this, staff looked at the community transportation plan, the 2021 plan. Jonesville Road is identified as a 2-lane with a middle left turn lane, curbs, gutters, bike lanes, sidewalks. And there's a collector recommendation also for a road that goes east from Jonesville Road as such, generally along an alignment such as that. The very newly adopted Greenway plan shows Greenway on the, I guess you'd say the south side of the Harris Creek, which it does come in and affect this site, and going to the northeast there, and then a side path along Jonesville Road. The bicycle plan, also newly adopted, shows bicycle facilities along Jonesville Road and along Mitchell Mill Road. As noted earlier, a traffic impact analysis, a full TIA was performed here. This is just some of the trip generation, AM, PM, and daily trips that were generated through that. Again, approximately 7,200 daily trips, just over 500 entering in the AM and PM, and 500 plus in the AM and PM, again, exiting the site. So conditions and are contained, sorry, the commitments to the recommendations for improvements are contained in the conditions, and they're also detailed in your staff memo. And there are 12 distinct recommendations there. For the consistency analysis, the RM and the NC districts are compatible and consistent with the medium density future land use category. So that is a very good fit in that regard. The 2021 CTP roadway network, those major roadways, both that collector and the improvements to Jonesville are identified and shown on this concept plan and through the TIA process for improvements. The greenways are shown as consistent with the 2022 Greenway Plan. Looking at the densities of this in relation to the districts, the RM district density comes out to about 2.2 dwelling units per acre. So that's a little less than the medium density, which is a 3 to 5 unit per acre range. And again, remember, this is on that east or right side of the project where 49% of the site is proposed and shown to be generally undisturbed and left undeveloped. The NC district density works out to 3.4, or if you remove that 8-acre commercial tract at the corner, goes up slightly to 4 dwelling units per acre. And so that's right in the middle ground of that 3 to 5 dwelling units per acre. And that is a mix of townhomes and single family also. And then the non-residential component is wholly appropriate at the corner of 2 state roads. Looking at the Campo thoroughfare plan, Mitchell Mill is identified as a major thoroughfare and Jonesville is a minor thoroughfare. Jonesville is a 3-lane facility. Mitchell Mill will be a 4+ turn lane type of facility ultimately. So with that analysis, staff is recommending approval of MA 2206 and asks that the board tonight make a motion similar. The applicant is here. They do not have a presentation on screen, but I'm sure can answer some questions for you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair and planning board members, I'm Beth Trejos. I'm an attorney with Nelson Mullins, and I'm here tonight on behalf of Hopper Communities, requesting your approval of this proposed zoning case. Mike gave a very thorough presentation, checked off a number of the items on my sheet here, and I will endeavor not to repeat myself, but not to repeat Mike really, but to give you, to hit some items that he has not discussed. We have applied for annexation into the town. This property is intended to be a part of the town, and it is addressed in the future land use plan. That's how we got the recommendation for medium density residential here, even though we're not yet officially in your ETJ. The property south of Mitchell Mill, it will be the city of Raleigh. So this is the edge of your jurisdiction in this area. You know, these homes will be about a mile down the road from the new Walbrook development, where there's going to be pretty significant retail, including the Publix. And so we thought that would be supportive of that coming retail, as well as provide an opportunity for a smaller neighborhood center here at the intersection of two major roads, Mitchell Mill and Jonesville Road. So we have included that proposal. We have some concept plans that we have been working through internally relative to the commercial. They're not committed elements of the zoning, but if there's interest, we can share with you what our thought process is. We have fleshed out in more detail, you know, the residential components, and so you can see the mix of single family and townhomes on both sides of the street. There are significant recreational amenities, and I think it might be really hard to see. I believe you have one of these in your packet as well, but there's quite a lot of greenway through this site. I think, you can kind of see the little, it was hard to see from the audience, the little pointer thing, but I'm just going to try to run over sort of the greenway areas here so you can see how extensive it is on both sides of the project here. It eggs out here, but also continues through here. So it provides connection, you know, through to the commercial, through the whole site. It would really create a good walking trail.
Just out of curiosity, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
On the Greenway, because it's going to cross Jonesville, we should have decent traffic in it. Would there be plans to put in a pedestrian walkway, flashing lights, just so people going down that road can exceed some limits?
Right. So that is really the purview of NCDOT. And so, you know, we have not proposed anything with this plan, but if they deem that necessary, they will tell us. But we have lined up our streets to provide, so the access roads here are lined up. We think, you know, and I'm no traffic engineer, but, and we do have the traffic engineer here and the civil engineer here, but, you know, we think this creates the best opportunity for connection, as well as lining up the greenway crossings as well. So we've tried to create a circumstance where it would be direct and easy to cross the street. So in addition to the greenway amenity, there's a pool and cabana here, central, several open space pieces, another dog park, two dog parks really, one on each side of the road. All told, there are 60 acres of the 141 acre site that are undeveloped area.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
So how much of that is active and how much of it is passive? I'm looking at a map, and that's a bunch of floodplain and swamp. So is that active that can be used, or is it just going to be a swamp? You're going to try to do anything around it?
Right, so there will be both active and passive areas. Pat, maybe you can help me differentiate what we have programmed in terms of area. Let me look and see if that's on your, I don't see where, if you differentiate between active and passive open space, but you can see that, you know, the significant greenway area, the dog parks, the pool, these areas that are intended to have some active element. And this is Pat Barbo, the civil engineer.
My name is Patrick Barbo with the Timmons Group out of Raleigh. So at this level, we didn't break out the active and passive. We know the LDO has a percentage of each. You know, the wetlands and a lot of that open spaces, you can't disturb it. Obviously, that's why we didn't do any development in that area. But like the dog park, we're actually proposing a trailhead. We kind of worked extensively with the Parks and Rec Department. And we're going to provide a trailhead off of Mitchell Mill Road where people can actually park and then walk the trails within the site. But as far as percentages, at this higher level, we just haven't broken them down in that detail yet. Yeah, sure.
I've got one question for you while you're here. On the kind of the northeast side of the Harris Creek, I see there's a existing sanitary sewer easement, but I don't see a greenway trail on that side of the creek. Is there going to be one installed there as well?
Again, we worked with Parks and Rec on that. We didn't want to disturb the buffered area and the wetlands areas. So what we agreed upon with Parks and Rec staff is we kind of more follow the road system, like a 10-foot greenway trail along the roads. And then we went behind the lots as we got more to the, I guess, to the east of the
You want
site.
to use the pointer?
Originally, there it is. It's sensitive. Originally we talked to Parks and Rec about actually crossing, the wetlands area, but having been through this before, being 150 plus acre site, you can only impact a certain amount of wetlands with DEQ and the Army Corps. So in discussions with staff, we kind of are coming off Jonesville Road, kind of behind the proposed wet pond. There'll be a stream crossing, kind of connect to the to this section of the single-family lots, and then we kind of just again follow the back of the lots and the back of the proposed wet ponds.
Yeah, and I was more looking on the other side of the creek from there. I don't see go more north, on that kind of isolated little triangular shape.
Oh, this area over here?
Yeah, I didn't see a greenway trail on that side.
We weren't proposing that. There'll be a greenway path, on Jonesville Road, both sides. Just on our side. But we did not propose a greenway trail on that side. We discussed it with staff. A big reason being we do have to impact the wetlands to cross, from the orientation kind of doesn't have a north arrow, but we discussed crossing again, but we didn't because of the environmental impacts. And we are a little concerned about, there's a bridge that is located right here, for crossing Harris Creek. We're still not sure what DOT is going to allow because that bridge is limited width, 2-lane road. So we're kind of working with DOT to get the bike lanes to work, crossing that bridge. And I'm not sure it's going to be pedestrian safe to have a bike trail and a greenway trail crossing with the traffic. And obviously we can't widen that bridge just because of the expense. So.
And the bike trail is that side street that Mike was talking about.
Yeah, and I believe that's a 10-foot wide.
I think that's
Instead of a sidewalk, it's a 10-foot wide concrete sidewalk.
So that's in addition to the greenway along Jonesville Road. Just along the whole road.
I said that just the site has a lot of environmental constraints to it.
That is the general overview in combination with the information Mike provided you. I guess I would point out that town staff recommends approval, and we hope that you will too. But we're all here to answer any questions you might have. And Craig with Ramey Kemp, who's the town's traffic engineer, is here as well.
I just had a quick question or observation, and I was wondering if maybe you could help here. So going back to that triangle piece that's up top, I noticed that there's 2 access points in and out of the subdivision or community. Are we, and I'm again, my eyes, I can't see
It's hard
very
to see,
well.
it is.
Are the other sites as well have multiple access points in and out, or is it just that one lifeline that's going into that section there off to the right? If you come down
So there's one access point here.
and there, and then
And
if
one
you come
here.
down south,
Yep, right there.
what about these properties and these communities here as well, having multiple access points?
So these are the primary entrances. There's a stub here, There is an access here on Mitchell Mill, another access here on Mitchell Mill, one here as well. So there's 3 accesses there along Mitchell Mill. There's also a future access to the commercial along Mitchell Mill that, will interconnect into the street networks. And then there are 1, 2 access points on Jonesville Road on this side. Here, there's a single point of access
And
on
that's a
Jonesville
single point. If
Way.
you continue on that, yes, what about that community there? Is that also single? Will there be a connector anywhere in the
There's
future?
a connection here and a connection here for the future.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. That helps.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I'm apologize for that. It's hard to, it is
Would
hard
you
to
have
see.
put a cross connector from the east side to the west side above the commercial?
From the east side, so above. are you
Right
talking-
there, yeah, that road that you've got right there, going back to this other community, you've got a single point into it. Why not have a connector going back to the east side? Right through there.
Are you asking,
That's what he's asking about.
Yeah, right
yeah,
there.
an access point here?
Yeah, when you're asking if there's only a single
Yes.
spot,
Well, in the end, they're trying to get as much density as they can, giving up all this open space.
but it's not usable open space if it's a swamp.
No, yeah, that is true. It's just, it's where the site's located, but
And it-
obviously doing that, you would lose, several lots.
And it's narrow here, so I think the thought was the interconnection could be better provided here to the north and to these adjacent pieces which are going to develop.
That's future, that's not now, and that
That's
may
right,
not ever get
absolutely, it is
developed for
future.
many years.
It is future. Rolesville's real popular, so we don't know many years or not, but
That's not adjacent to the Callis Falls, is it, Meredith?
It is not.
no, it's a good distance from Callis Falls.
It's over on Rolesville Road.
Or near that power line.
Yeah.
The name of it, mainly farm.
Do you feel confident that DOT will grant you 3 full movement access points onto Mitchell Mill?
Well, the TI is still being reviewed by DOT. I don't think we've got comments back from DOT yet. No. But I think they will.
And they've participated in the 3 TRC meetings we've had, and they haven't said, this isn't going to work, right? So they've seen this several times. Of course, when we come through with the final site plan, they'll give their final opinion, but they are well aware of what's being proposed.
What section did you say was gonna be in the city of Raleigh? Is the left side of Jonesville Road gonna be considered city of Raleigh, and then
No, so on the other side of Mitchell Mill, so down here is Raleigh. If you can see, this is Raleigh.
so everything in this would be annexed into the,
Yes, all this is proposed to be a part of Rolesville, and it's planned, in your comprehensive plan and in conjunction with the county to be a part of Rolesville.
And as part of this development, as you know, you can see the sanitary sewer easement and the mains going through,
yeah.
the wetlands and the pond area. As part of this development, we'd have to extend about a mile of water main.
Okay.
It'll be come down, actually, Kalis Falls is running a main, towards Mitchell Mill.
They're running
And
it
we'll
now,
have to
yeah.
extend from there to the west down Mitchell Mill to meet this site.
And it does provide opportunities for future interconnection along Jonesville Road. So infrastructure that benefits the community more broadly.
That's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your time tonight, your attention.
I assume we have people signed up for comments?
Really?
Okay.
No speakers.
Any general comments, questions for,
My only commentary would be longer term, thinking about the Mitchell Mill Road intersection, because there's that traffic light at some point.
Yeah.
With the warrant. And I'm just thinking, there's gonna be people coming out of this road, going up Mitchell Mill to go to the high school or to Rolesville. Although Jonesville Road's not a bad way to get there either. Just, I wonder how that will accelerate that Mitchell Mill, Rolesville crossing fund?
I don't know, as it is, I think this is the longest TIA to-do list I've seen yet, by a bit.
And the only other concern to as well, as far as the access points, which is why I brought it up, is because if we ever have that intersection just cut off for whatever reason, there's no emergency vehicles getting into those other subdivisions. And so it's something to just kind of take a look at.
With the last
We did.
meeting.
Just something to really kind of realign and take a look at, because one of the things that we do have in our mission statement here is safety and the well-being, health and safety of our residents. So we're making these decisions and we want to make sure. But that was it. That was just my only comment that I had. So, yeah.
I'd have liked to have seen that, and I'd like to have seen a greenway up on the upper north side along that. If you'd already a sanitary sewer easement, it would make more sense. Why couldn't you go ahead and put a greenway along that on the north, that north triangle? Or that upper triangle, I'm not sure the orientation.
As I said, no, this is not the final approval. We get it. I get it. It's
Yeah.
just what we're seeing today, but just, again, some ideas for
Nuggets
consideration.
for consideration.
Correct.
The board could make suggested conditions, if you will, to your recommendation that goes to the town board, if you like, to put down on paper your thoughts.
If it would be appropriate, we could talk briefly to the more, I guess that's not north, but more the east side, this isolated piece here. Given the environmentally sensitive areas here, it's very difficult to make connections. So, to connect a greenway would require a pretty significant crossing of an environmental area. As well as other points of interconnection would have that same issue. And so it's, the environmental features that do create some isolation for this piece.
There's a greenway that goes along the bottom side of that triangle, though, isn't there? Because I know that's like a dirt road, if I remember correctly, or a fire road.
Gropeg Lane you talking about?
Is that it, Gropeg?
This is there's a street here.
That's Gropeg right
This
there.
is Gropeg, yes.
But there's one further up, I thought there was if you go further north, where that top triangle is,
Here?
yeah, right through that angled if I remember correctly, I thought that was a dirt road or path.
To my knowledge, there's not, but correct me
That's
if I'm.
roughly where they brought the sewer lines through.
Yeah, the surveyors didn't pick it up, so.
Did you see the way ATVers go on it?
So they just brought the sewer easements through right there by Harris Creek, by the bridge, just north of the bridge, pretty much. I
Right,
believe.
right.
Might be what you're saying, but they-
How many total home sites are we talking about?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, unofficially, we don't know what people do, but.
It could be a clearing, as you said, used as a rogue trail of some sort, but I do not believe it's a greenway per the Parks and Recreation
No,
agreement.
that's what I'm wondering now, because if you
Could it be converted?
If you converted that into a greenway, you would be following an existing path that doesn't disturb
A new disturbance.
the wetlands, because you've got a sewer easement, that's his point.
Well, and the issue I was really referring to is connecting into the Greenway network. That road would require a crossing.
We have lots of communities that have greenways that are not connected yet on that.
Yeah.
So building them and then potentially connecting them at some point.
I do not believe that a greenway was shown in the 2022 Greenway Plan for that area,
No,
which is not to say that new ones cannot be.
And we did
Created.
engage with the Parks Department in the three TRC meetings to find the most beneficial location for the Greenway. And, as you can see, there is a lot of Greenway. Again, I can't tell you the exact distance, Pat might be able to, but it's, all on this side. It goes off of the street here, comes here, crosses the street. There's a leg here to connect where there is an opportunity for future interconnection, and then it goes back down through the neighborhood here, and there is this trailhead with parking, that we have designed. That's in addition to the side path along Jonesville Road as well. So that's a pretty significant amount of trail, for this relatively small community.
Michael, if
Yes.
I'm assuming all the streets in here will have sidewalks on both sides as well, right? So
That is the
So-
LDO standard, I believe.
So
today.
there will be plenty of walkable areas within the neighborhood, just
Internal
not a
circulations.
greenway trail, so it's supposed to be.
A little less likely to have cars piling up at the dog park.
Greenway trails are getting off-street more and more. The new plan really stressed that. I think the town board has stressed that. So this plan is doing a lot of that. There's only a small area here where maybe it's parallel to, but it will not be back of curb. The side paths now are wider sidewalks, basically, as they were described correctly. So those become wider sidewalks in the area adjacent to streets, but they really do function by the width as more of a greenway. And then all the internal streets will have their pedestrian sidewalks, your typical 5-foot.
One last question.
Sure.
I promise. I think I'm good after this. Is just remind me again, as far as the single family, those lot sizes, what are the average sizes or what is the minimum size? The single? 5,000?
That is the RM standard.
It is the RM standard.
Okay.
I thought,
Under the cluster, correct.
Under the
So
cluster.
the purple, sorry,
Okay.
to me, they're purple. The RM district is again on this east side of Jonesville. This is where, again, the applicant has shown the indication that they want to do the cluster option. That reduces the minimum lots to 5,000 square foot. Then over here in the NC zoning district, the single-family lots, do you know that?
That 5,000 also.
Also regulated to 5,000, and then the townhome lots are obviously, much less than that.
And how many total single-family lots are there? How many total units are there?
So the request is for up to 398 total, and up to 134 of those could be townhomes. And the concept does commit to the general location of the townhomes being in the west side of Jonesville. That is where the NC district, and the NC district allows the townhome or single-family attached. The RM district does not permit townhomes. So we can all feel confident there will not be townhomes on this east side of Jonesville Road. The zoning district does not permit them. So the townhomes would be generally where they're shown on this drawing, right here in this area. So just short of 400, roughly 130 maximum townhomes.
Mr. Hill, to your question about the open space, and I don't know if Mike is ready to do this, the way the LDO sets up the difference between what we might call open space and active open space is to take open space and then cap the credit you can get for open space that is dedicated to areas that are, as you mentioned, not usable. So you are capped at X% of environmentally sensitive. You are capped at X% that's being used for stormwater. So and this is just the way the LDO worked out, you back into how much open do you have to have. I think that's why it's difficult at this point to say, but there is an LDO minimum. We could probably do the algebra to calculate.
Well, if there's no more discussion, the floor is open for a motion.
all right, I don't hear any other questions or comments. I'd like to motion that we approve we approve MA 2206, 5109 Mitchell Mill Road with conditions to consider multiple access points and connectivity on Jonesville Road.
We have a
I'd
motion.
like to add to that it be studied of a crosswalk that was brought up towards the commercial side, if you're going to have walkability, I think that's important to have a crosswalk included in the plans with that same connectivity.
Okay.
Would you like to amend your motion?
Sure. I'd like to motion that we approve MA 2206 at 5109 Mitchell Mill Road with conditions to consider multiple access points and connectivity in addition to a study for crosswalk on Jonesville Road.
I have a motion with some conditions. Is there a second?
Second.
Yes,
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please give me an aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, it is unanimous. We recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Next item up is TA 22-01, LDO Round 3 Technical Amendments.
I missed that. What? Something? No. I am.
Meredith, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I am surprised at how quickly we got through the first three items.
Don't jinx.
Oh, now I'm just gonna. Now we're gonna be here for 3 hours talking about round 3.
Yeah, right.
I'm kidding. So we really started talking about LDO round 3 at the joint work session you all had with the town board back in March. So I appreciate all of your help and input going through this process. It has been significant. You can see how many times planning board is written on this slide. So I have the 14 different proposed amendments listed, 2 per slide. I'd just like to run through them so we look at the entire list. The first one has to do with allowing townhomes in the residential medium district. Right now, the LDO lists townhomes as an allowed use only in residential high. And this particular amendment was inspired after a conversation with the mayor saying, you know, we've seen some townhomes come through, and sometimes the density doesn't need to be the high density range of over 6. So if there's a townhome product that fits that 3 to 5 unit per acre, that could be labeled residential medium, and that could be more palatable to some in our community. So that was the story behind adding townhomes as an allowed use in residential medium.
My only question in that place would putting some condition on the number from a percentage standpoint. You're gonna have still a farming residential community, right? So open space, bigger lot type things is kind of part of the look. And adding the ability to do townhomes in a medium.
Sure.
You'd love to see that be, yeah, you could put some, but don't create 250,000 townhomes and 2 homes, consider it medium.
Right now, I believe we still have the statement in the LDO that says townhomes can't exceed 15 acres or 15-acre section of a larger project in one pod.
Actually reduce the number of townhomes potentially, because you could pack 8 into a high density.
Right, and with the lower density type townhome, to fit in that medium density category, it's going to be a larger product.
What's the maximum number you can put in that?
In medium, 5.
So 3 to 5 in the medium, and then 6 to 8?
6 to,
ish.
yes, because 12 is only for multifamily, I believe you're right. It's 6 to 9 in residential high for townhomes.
Meredith, what has been the typical proposed density for the townhome projects that we've seen? It seems as though they've all been pretty much 3 to 5 rather than the 8, 10, 12, 14 that we see in Raleigh.
You know, I think you're making a great point. Yes, we have seen a lot of them are falling in that medium range. Parker Ridge that I presented this evening, the townhome section was 3.9 something units per acre. So yes, that fits in that medium range.
I've noticed that as well. Was that by design?
I don't think so. I think that's what we've seen over the last year.
When I think of townhome products, they're great products. I just always associate them with being more closer to hustle and bustle,
Sure.
Walkable features of a town. So if they're out there where there's farmlands, unless there's going to be a commercial aspect or component or feature that's out there, like shops and retail, maybe I could see the appeal to have some townhome, but also keeping in tune with affordability and just what people are looking for these days. So I'm not sure, team. Not sure how I feel about that. So as I said, mentally, I've always thought of townhomes being closer to the city area, not in the ETJ, but I'm not always right, so.
Oh, sure. Well, townhomes right now are allowed, in addition to being allowed in residential high, they are allowed in our activity center districts.
Sure.
And that is something that you would see in those walkable areas. And I have heard what you've just said. I've heard that from the planning board before and also from the town board, that there is a desire to have that type of residential product within walking distance of services and
Yeah.
other similar things.
Mr. Cross is remembering that he was part of the stakeholder group, and the stakeholder group had elected not to place townhome in RM, figuring that it needed to be toward the core or it needed to be associated with other uses.
Correct.
Like the mixed use and activity center districts, the planned districts. So you're not losing your mind.
Okay.
You sat on that committee.
I thought I was, yes.
And we can, as we go through these, I can note next to each one if you all feel like you're not behind a certain amendment, but you are behind another one, I can note that.
I'm with Mr. Cross on that right there. I don't think it's a great use for him way out. I'd rather see it towards the activity centers, but not out in those ETJ pieces.
Mr. Chairman, do we need to do a vote on each amendment?
Are we
Motion.
just advising right now, or do you actually need votes from us on?
I'll
each?
need a recommendation,
Okay.
at least at the end, but like I said, I'm happy to I'm making notes as we go, and you can say you recommend approval for 2 through 14 and not 1. It'll work out fine that way.
If there are more people on the board who feel we should leave it as is, then let's recommend leaving it as is.
I think that's where I'm leaning, leaving it as is.
Okay?
I
I'm seeing head nodding over there about, okay. All right. Can go to proposed amendment number 2. This was inspired in order to support the Mayor's Monarch Challenge, to add pollinator gardens in the LDO as an option for a passive feature. Like right now, the table in the LDO lists gardens as a possible passive feature for open space. So we'd like to change that to say gardens or pollinator gardens or other gardens instead of just gardens.
Makes sense.
Versus community garden? Like if you did a community garden,
Sure, that would be a type of garden.
would that be a passive space though, or an active space?
Ooh, that's a great, well, garden is listed under passive, so I'd probably keep it under passive, although, you have a little activity planting and harvesting.
My argument would be it would be a community thing, so it would be active,
Mm-hmm.
just like a playground or other thing, versus a pollinator garden or other garden, flower garden, whatever. It would just, that would be planted and left alone for the most part.
Could a developer propose a community garden and then request it to be counted as an active recreation area? Or
They could.
that would take care of Mr. Schwartz?
It would require a staff determination as to what the ordinance says. If you want to make something currently passive active, you would do that with a text amendment. throw it in your recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah, I would recommend that if you make it a community garden, which is a activity area, then it should be active
Okay.
versus other areas
I'll
which
add
should be passive.
Okay. Sounds good. So otherwise, I saw good head nodding for proposed amendment number 2.
Right.
Number 3, perimeter buffers. We talked about this at your last meeting, and we went through the different buffer types, and you all gave me some good input on that. So with our perimeter buffers, the proposal is to remove the requirement for buffers between parcels of the same non-residential zoning district, and in addition, add a landscape-only buffer type. If you remember, type 1 is 10 foot wide with a fence, type 2 is 15 feet wide with a fence, type 3, I believe 25 feet wide with a wall, and type 4, I'm going to say, now I'm losing my memory was going great until then, greater than 30 feet with a wall. So all of our buffer types have a fence or a wall. So requiring, we talked about that before, and I think you all were on board that it's unreasonable and not great to have fences and walls between everything. So removing those between non-residential districts, the same non-residential district makes sense, and then adding a buffer type where you would have landscaping only. And that is proposed between residential areas and non-residential areas, residential areas that are the same. So residential low next to residential low, you could have just landscaping. However, you could certainly add a condition to have a fence or a wall. And then some similar non-residential districts, like general commercial next to commercial highway, could be landscaping only. And then general commercial next to general commercial would be no buffer required. And that table markup was included in your packet. Any thoughts or additional thoughts or comments on the buffer piece?
That wouldn't include any walkways or any type of connectors in the middle of the buffer. Like if you have two commercial areas with a parking lot, do you have to walk out of the parking lot, walk in the down, or can you put a path in between? Or
You would absolutely put a path in between and connection in between. That makes, in my opinion, makes for a better design and development.
and that ordinance wouldn't have to be amended in any way to do that?
Yep,
Because it would be considered a roadway or a walkway?
that would be fine.
I agree.
Makes sense to me.
Okay, great,
I'm for that,
awesome,
for the change.
thank you. And proposed amendment number 4 is about streetscape buffers. Right now, in our ordinance, a 30-foot streetscape buffer is required along thoroughfares, and staff is proposing to add a 10-foot streetscape buffer for collectors. So get a few more trees in there.
That'd be fine, too.
Yeah.
I like it.
I agree.
Okay,
Yes.
awesome. Proposed amendment number 5 has to do with requiring that a landscape plan be prepared by a landscape architect, landscape designer, or horticulturalist. And this was inspired by staff review of landscape plans over the past year. Many of the landscape plans are basic code compliant landscape plans without much variation. And I have to admit, if this is coming from a landscape architect, love to see a little more flavor injected in our landscape plans.
So you're eliminating civil engineers preparing landscape plans?
Yes. One note, horticulturalists, you have to have no designation to become a horticulturalist. That's an expert in gardening. So that could be a lot of interpretation for horticulturalists. Same thing with landscape designer. There's a lot of people that claim that aren't necessarily knowledgeable. on there, but I do see the engineers and the architects and lots of other commercials hit the numbers, hit the marks. It says 20 bushes, 6 trees, and check the list. There's no, what you're looking for is diversity and some creativity. And
Yes.
hoping maybe these people will do that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Who reviews the landscaping plans on the staff level?
Right now on TRC, we have Withers Ravenel on contract that does our planning review. We plan on doing that for the rest of this budget year. And in the next budget year, we're going to look at either adding a staff person to do in-house plan review or continue with them. I'm hoping for another staff person. We will have to see how that goes.
Is there a way, to your point, at a size of a property, right, any acreage over X, that they have to get somebody that's
That's a great
specific?
idea. That's a really nice idea. So something, like that 2-acre point, that 5-acre point, if it's smaller than 2 acres, maybe it's
There's not
perfectly
much you
fine.
can do,
Not
right?
much you can do, sure.
That's what my thought was, is this is residential and commercial, so if you're a residential, adding a 25-foot bay on the end of your garage to pay a landscape or architect $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, that's a significant impact to their budget to build an addition on the garage. And I've known people that have run into that before with Rolesville, so that's something I think we need to look at. I think the size is a good idea.
Meredith, what's the practice in our neighboring communities for that? And is as landscape architects are licensed, is there any requirement? I ask the legal question, being the lawyer who doesn't know.
For a landscape architect to be licensed?
No,
Or-
is there any requirement on that point that our neighboring communities place that someone be a licensed landscape architect?
Yes.
To be doing this work?
I have seen that.
Or someone else
Where I have
qualified.
worked before, and some other neighboring communities, they do require landscape plans.
Raleigh is, on commercial, it's landscape architect or a PE.
That's
So
what
anybody's
I'm,
got an engineering.
That was what I was hinting at.
what I'm more common, or accustomed to seeing is landscape architect or professional engineer preparing the plan. And that the reason I asked about who's required on the staff level, from my experience, like I know City of Raleigh, they have their whole urban forestry department.
Sure.
And they make recommendations to people's plans as to, species, because the engineers and most of the landscape architects I work with, they're just gonna go down the list of approved species and they're gonna plug and play. And, most of them aren't getting into checking into a lot of diversity of plant species unless it's pushed from a staff level.
Again, when do you tier it, right? A certain level of size, you have to have this, at a certain level above that, because you're taking up so much land and potentially cutting down a bunch of trees in that property. We had talked about that diversity list, right? What's it look like? Does it have to be reviewed?
Meredith, is a landscape plan required for small things like adjusting my garage?
Not adjusting your garage.
Or
No.
expand, I'm going to turn the back porch into a 3-season. Do I need a landscape plan?
No.
I'm trying to parse out whether the incident,
So that-
whether that incident can arise.
In the past, so maybe the LDO, it isn't, maybe I'm off on that. In the past, we've had to do that. To add on to your garage, you've had to show the bushes, the buffer between you and your neighbor. You've had to decide what trees, who's gonna do what.
About
It
single-family
wouldn't
residential.
necessarily need to be a stamped architect's design, but it did have to be a design with a permit.
We probably call it a plot plan. That's been the bailout
Right, I don't
position for
consider that a
small items.
landscape plan.
We call it a
Yeah.
plot plan, and for that, we don't require an engineer even. So is that in the LDO? I really should know that. I don't.
I don't know, maybe it was.
For those who are exempt from the site plan concept, and all they have to do is submit a plot plan, can the plot plan be prepared by the property owner himself with a crayon?
Throws into another
I might ask Shelley.
I know because I've actually done it with a crayon.
For residential, if they are looking for a garage, it does not need to be sealed by an engineer. However, for a grander scale, it would need to be, yes. Anything architectural that would be
I always thought that communities that have homeowners association just typically handle these things. I don't know if we get to that point, are we just,
Another level on
just,
top.
okay,
These would be plans before homes are there.
gotcha, I see.
Mr. Lawrence, would it be enough for us to take it back with staff, scour the LDO, take the comment, and make sure that we write the language of the amendment to match the concern? The planning board doesn't have to know the ordinance. We just have to identify the concern and then draft to it.
Okay.
I think my thoughts on it would be to maybe have a landscape architect or someone review our species list and maybe get more specific on that as to what the town would like to see. And maybe, refine that as to what the town wants rather than just requiring a landscape architect. Because, I mean, a lot of firms that I work with, they have a lot of PEs on staff, but not many landscape architects.
It'd be really nice if somebody at least knew to look at a soil map and see what would be compatible for the site.
Put willows on dry sand, not working.
You don't want to see the willow planted on the top of the hill in tight clay or.
That's why I wonder if it's a certain size, you could ask for a higher level review of that species list. Because if I'm a builder, here's my list, I must put together a price list, like, what's it gonna cost me? Let me get the cheaper ones, so all of a sudden you lose your diversity plan.
Right. Mr. Moss and Davin probably remember the stakeholder group did call for a native and adapted species list to be adopted as a palette as part of the LDO process. I don't know where that is, but that was identified, and it's great that you're bringing that up again.
As Withers is reviewing the plans, have they been dedicating a landscape architect to do landscape and plan reviews?
You know what? That's a really great suggestion. We have planners doing it. And one of the planners on the job, she does have experience with landscape design, but she is not a landscape architect. But great suggestion. Okay.
Just really quick, something just came to thought here. Instead of using language like landscape architect or design or article, could we just replace that with landscaping professionals or experts? I don't know, just this way we're kind of covering.
What makes that person an
That's
expert?
true. How do we measure that,
I'm a
right?
landscape contractor. Does that let me do it?
I don't know. That's a great question. So maybe, I guess, leave that language in. I was wondering why, just to kind of push that a little bit and cover everything, because I don't know if you want an entire list of all those professionals and experts and engineers, and something to think about.
Sure. I think staff's frustration has been, or me personally, I've been disappointed in the overall landscape plans I've seen for subdivisions. I think Rolesville is a beautiful community, and I would like to see some more thought put into the landscape plans. And maybe that gets thrown back on me to think, is there something else we need to be doing with our landscape ordinance to make sure we get better landscape plans? So this might be one to study a little more.
I think from installing this stuff for many, many years, that's at the very last of these projects. They've spent all the money on engineering, figuring out these wetlands and traffic analysis, and they get down to that very last thing. It's what can we do that checks the boxes?
Right.
And I really think that's what happens in a lot of cases. And also you heard the lady on the last case talk about why they didn't want a collector, and we all knew the answer was because it was going to cost money to take that one lot out on there. And so a lot of those will look down the list and say what's locally available and what's cheap. And that's where the numbers that's what the designs come down to, was because we run out of money by the time we get to landscape, how inexpensive can we do it? And so a lot of it's picked by.
I've got an area this big in the CAD file that needs to be filled with vegetation. How can I get it?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Just my concern about the diversity part of that, right? If
And-
you get
and
to
so-
a certain point, everybody will pick the same thing.
And that's exactly what you look at here. Every one of these hollies, that's the main thing in front of the parking lots is put a, needlepoint holly because it's easy to get and it meets the 18 inches at an install.
Yeah, it's always the same variety of oak in the parking lots.
Correct.
I don't notice always that they run out of money because the plans are approved before they start any construction, so, but it is
But with
what's
they're
locally
trying
available
to
and what's
send
the
it through at
easiest.
the end when they're paying for all the plans. Let's get that, let's don't spend a lot of extra time on it because all we need to do is check boxes at that point. We're selling this thing as it is.
That's where I
They'll
think
spend a little bit on some of the berms on the entrances, on the streets or in the center islands, but the buffers, you end up with the same hollies and the same cypresses and those kinds of things is what I think you're seeing is it's the same group of plants is always put on those
Yeah,
buffers.
I think that's where it's gonna go back to the approved list, because if it's approved, and we can't say, well, it's approved, but we don't like that one as good as another one, so.
Just need to say we need more than 3 or 4 varieties, that we want 10 varieties on this, based on linear feet or something like that of plants, these instead of a single species. That goes back to, I think, what you have to say is.
I'm going to jump ahead just for a moment to proposed amendment number 8. And that one states require at least 4 different plant species with no one being greater than 35% of the palette. So you can't have all willow oaks and red maples. You'd have to have 4 different tree types, again, with no one being more than 35%. So that covers a little bit of what
Yep.
we were just talking about.
I think if 8 were approved, I think that's gonna take care of some of your issues with number 5.
Okay.
Yep.
I will jump back to 6 now. So with number 6, this is reinstating a requirement from the UDO to have every parking space in a development be within 60 feet of the trunk of a tree. And bringing this back in is meant to tie the terminal island, interior island standards and divider medians and parking space landscaping, tying it all together. We've seen in a few plans that have come through over the last 6 months that we're not getting quite the coverage we're looking for. So I was hoping that adding that requirement to have every parking space be within 60 feet of the trunk of a tree would ensure that coverage.
Is that the entirety of the parking space or just a portion of the
Not the,
parking
yeah,
space?
I've gotten that. The majority of the parking space, it doesn't have to be every little inch, a little corner could not be covered by that 60-foot radius.
I think I'm
I'm
good
gonna go
with
on
that.
that, yes.
Yeah, basically put some tree every 100 feet or so,
Yeah.
not 200 Asheville.
Proposed amendment number 7, we talked about at your last meeting. This was one we've been going back and forth on figuring out what's the right path forward with clarifying the requirement for replacing vegetation that was removed. Again, just to remind everybody, our ordinance requires that an applicant notes all the 18-inch evergreen trees and 20-foot or 20-inch deciduous trees that are removed. And the requirement in the ordinance right now says that those trees have to be replaced on site with at least 4 or more trees of similar species and size, but there's no definition there. So just an example, I know the Walbrook site plan where the Publix is going, they did their tree survey and they removed, or they haven't removed, they will be removing 23 trees that meet that category of, the 18 to 20 inches. So they were trying to, we were trying to figure out how do we replace that appropriately. So if they had to replace, and I should have brought my calculator, if they had to replace 25% of the caliper inches removed, let's see if we can do math. Okay, so if 20 times 20 is 400? So let's say there were 400 caliper inches that were removed, and they would have to replace 25. So they have to replace 100 inches of trees, and that gives them a definition of what has to be replaced. Instead of saying replace with 4 or more trees of similar species and size.
would you just create a minimum at that point as well? Right, if I move 100, if I move the 400, I have to replace with 100, but if you get a real small spot,
Let's see what I wrote for that one.
that's just a number that you do a minimum of 2 trees.
Let's see, the actual amendment language says it shall be replaced on, or the proposed language, it shall be replaced on site with trees totaling 25% of the caliper inches removed, and whatever that calculation is up to them. So if it's easiest for the developer to do a few very large trees, have at it. If it's easier for them to do a combination of smaller trees and large trees, it's however they can fit it onto their site.
I think what you're saying, Jim, even if they remove one tree, basically 25% of that's going to be a minimum of 2 2-inch trees.
Right.
So
Is there a floor on that, right, is the requirement? Like if I just, maybe I go out and find an 8-acre lot that I want to privately build on, which that still applies to, and I need to remove like 5 trees, am I being required to put in and remove 100 inches, right, of trees, so I have to put in 25 back?
Yes.
Do I really need to, if it's a single small development? It's not even development. I think we're looking at just like clear cutting a whole bunch of stuff, and you can't do that or prevent that, but just removing a couple trees because it's my home. I got to move the driveway.
I think a tree preservation plan is, there is a size where you don't have to do, if you're a certain size, or I can't remember if it's 2 acres or 5 acres, you don't have to do a tree preservation plan. So if it's
under that amount, if you're under that size.
If you're under that size, you don't have to.
That makes sense.
You
Then
don't have to do it.
It would be just concern me if you're just a single homeowner with a small lot. And
Sure.
now I'm replacing a bunch of trees that just to get my driveway in.
Right. So likely would not apply.
I think I'm good with this proposed change.
Okay. All right, wonderful. And we already talked about 8. And number 9, we talked about this one back in March at the joint work session, just to say wood light poles are not allowed in residential subdivisions.
Yeah.
Number 10.
If a woodpecker on a metal pole, it's exciting.
Sounds loud and painful for the woodpecker. For number 10, foundation types, this has come up because there have been some concerns about the appearance of stem wall foundations versus crawl space foundations. And stem wall foundations can look like crawl space foundations if they're of a certain height. So the recommendation for this amendment is to require a minimum height of 18 inches for a stem wall type foundation. So it has the appearance of a crawl space. And that is something that I might need a little help from our town attorney on. In our ordinance, the single-family design guidelines are noted as something where applicants have to write a statement of consent. Or for example, we saw this evening with Parker Ridge, that applicant listed a lot of those single-family architectural conditions. Those were taken from our LDO, and they were committing to those with this particular project. But I think we talked before that a foundation is not an architectural item, so it could be required. So I'm wondering if I have it in the right place.
I don't know whether you have it in the right place, but
Okay.
yes, as to the former question, that foundations are not listed among the architectural features in the statute.
Okay. Well, I might need to make sure I have that in the right place.
And there's going to be some point where those two things intersect. And I'm sure Mr. Hill's thinking that, right? At some point, foundation, are we talking about the foundation, or we're talking about the skin on the foundation rather than the foundation itself? But generally speaking, across the state, since the adoption of that statute, it seems that the stem wall concept as a component of foundation has carried the day.
Is this 18 inches on all 4 sides, or?
I would say visible from the public right-of-way or private street. So we're talking about the front facade has been the concern I've heard from the town board.
Okay.
Doesn't the crawl space have to have a minimum of 30 inches underneath of it?
for mechanical?
I'm not sure.
That's typical.
I think the stem walls have been the issue. I rode through a neighborhood recently and looked, and there were stem walls, but the front, they were basically at grade.
Right.
But then the lot sloped back, so the
The side.
sides in the rear had a good reveal, but at the street view, street frontage did not.
Meredith, do you know what the source of the 18 inches was originally?
We talked about that being, that's the height of 3 steps. So if you have 3 steps going up to a front door, it has a certain look and feel.
So so with this, we would essentially be eliminating any zero entry or slab homes or patios.
No, I don't think that's not the intent, because I know we talked about that before, because that's something important if you're building a certain type of home. Like, for example, my parents live in a 55-plus community, and it's a zero entry into their home. They wanted something without steps. So there's a place for that. This is just saying if someone chooses that stem wall foundation, we want it to look a certain way.
So if they, and I think I've seen this in a few places, so if they basically build essentially a brick facade up and start the siding at 18 inches, is that still going to satisfy the town?
It seems as though that is exactly how this standard has developed in the building trade, and that seems to be the case. That is, we have seen numerous builders who have offered a stem wall condition as part of their approvals, as a give, as part of their process, and then the stem wall itself as an engineering concept turned out to be what a layperson would just call slab. Mm-hmm. So the concept here was to define a difference, in our LDO at least, between stem wall as a condition versus slab, which could be your zero entry option. I believe that is what the board has been looking for, so that there is some understanding when a builder offers construction of brick-faced stem wall, that that's going to be a meaningful thing rather than a brick. Or in some cases, it just said stem wall, in which case the siding was as low as you could go to meet building code and a drip.
And I guess what I'm looking at is when I was riding around a couple weeks ago, I think I even saw some houses where there's 18 inches of exposed brick, but then it's the doors, the bottom of the
Lower
door
than the brick.
is lower than the brick.
I think I've seen that.
And
Yeah, I know what
I
you're
mean,
talking about.
that meets. I mean, it kind of meets, giving that brick foundation look. But
I think
you
if
look
I'm
closely,
interpreting what folks have told me bother them, they like that. That is, that sort of gets you the best of both worlds. You get that differentiation between the siding and the foundation, while still eliminating the need for steps.
Yep. And I think by specifying foundation, it would eliminate exactly what we're talking about, because that exposed brick really isn't foundation. It's more of just a facade at that point in time. We may need some clarification on, building code and exactly how all these different types look.
I think Mr. Hill may be correct as to the minimums for the building code when you are using a traditional construction with a crawl space. I don't know that I've heard the board or anyone who has come to a meeting want to do 30 inches. Rather, the question is, we need to know that a commitment that someone might offer, I hereby promise I'm going to do all these with stem walls so they don't look like they're built on slab. That's what they say. Okay, what does that mean? And so how we can fix that is that we place it in our LDO. In this town, what that means, when you make that commitment, it means you're doing this. And as you point out, let's make sure we don't have an unintended consequence.
Actually, I have a question.
if Mike had brought it before, if you did, wasn't there something about percentages?
I think we had
Crawl space
talked,
versus stem wall? Was it one of you?
we had talked about that, saying, there's a place for the slab on grade. For example, I said like the kind of home my parents live in. For the amendment, it doesn't include anything like that. That seems like something that would be more project-specific, or we could recommend with conditions. We could certainly think more about this one and try to figure out a way to do that. Or add amendment text that states,
So if you don't do that, but everything is stem wall or everything is slab, crawl space?
means we're not telling people what their percentage is. We're telling them if you do a stem wall, it has to be this height.
Is there any way to add a construction drawing detail to the ordinance?
Yes.
Say, this is what it has to be?
Yeah, we can have
If
illustrations.
we did an illustration, then that would solve this,
Yeah.
this issue. If
Communicate
we
what we're-
also want it to look like this or what have you versus interpretation.
My only question on the 18, I think, was what you were saying, like my lot, if you look at the house on this side, the whole gradient, goes this way. So the stem wall over here is short. So the stem wall over here is 3.5 feet because of the grade of the lot. They leveled it out that way.
Yep.
So is it, oops, because that one's only 12 inches over on this side, do I fail? Or do I have an average of X?
Well, and I think that's what I was kind of asking Meredith, and she was saying from the street front. So then that means the front's got to be at least 18 inches.
But that's the front of my house, like the front of my house, if you're looking at the front of my house, the lot slopes like this, well, it slopes like this. Right? But, so the very front right corner of the house is very low, appearance-wise. It is 30 inches for the crawl space part of it, but to keep the house looking like it's near the level, over here at the left side, it's much higher.
One of the construction techniques that's happened a lot is step foundations. So
That
with
too.
the situation you're describing where you've got 0 at the front and 4 foot at the back, they'll go 2 foot or 10 foot and drop down, 2 foot and drop down to keep that masonry very much, cheaper, and then they'll put the walls up with wood because it's less expensive. That happens a lot.
And these
Which
are,
would cause some issues if anybody wants to come in and do retaining walls or add other things, because you can't get the grades up because the wood's too close. You want to keep it 6 inches from your, termite zone.
these are applying to new development, correct?
Yes,
So
that's,
existing,
No,
we're not going
right.
to go back and penalize?
no.
Okay. Just curious. Moving forward, right?
Moving forward.
Moving forward to new development.
What is the board's thought on the best way to go at this? Because I think the Board of Commissioners would be open to your thoughts, particularly those of you who have experience in the trades.
That's a great idea.
What,
I mean, I feel like there's a place for all.
we know there's a
foundation
problem.
types.
We don't know what the fix is.
Right.
And there certainly are other ideas. Certainly an illustration detail is likely already something that we realize will be needed for this. But is it a minimum? Is it an average across the frontage? Something that could be enforced by staff in an objective way, and at the same time, something that can be understood by the contractor or the architect in this case, so as to avoid a mistake that's costly.
I think follow the KISS model, keep it as a minimum.
Could you make it that from the street, it had to be a certain height, 18 inches, and then it could vary on the sides based on grade?
Yeah, Greg, looking at it from the street view or front right away of the front of the property, not the rear or sides.
Well, and I
Leave it
think,
at that.
and I mean, I think, my thoughts just, I think there's a place for all the foundation types, the slabs, the stem walls, and the crawl spaces. But if the town has a certain look that they want to see, some brick reveal or stone reveal on the front, then we could take care of it with some diagrams, and they may be able to, then they may be able to still utilize slab foundations in some areas if they give that, kind of that brick facade, which is, I don't think would really be a foundation at that point in time, but it's just, just some brick there.
Yeah.
But I think some diagrams and some specific
Or even
pictures.
that half-brick stuff, just to make it look good.
And I'm sure some of the builders that are in the town that are doing all the types right now, we could probably take pictures of some houses that are going up. And, if there's specific ones the town doesn't want, maybe we can put that in there as with an X, so don't do this.
Lots of stuff is that half brick, right behind us, right over here at the car wash, behind his dumpster is a veneer that's panels that looks like brick.
Yeah.
On, right over here at the other end of the shopping center. That's what that is. It's not brick.
Well, wait a second, the board had a problem with that before. I do want to say that. It was before my time, but I know we discussed that, the veneer brick. I don't know how it would fit in here, I'm not saying it can't, but I know there was a big issue with that.
To this point, the staff was not asked to, this is a technical amendment effort, so it's not an effort to remove any construction type. Rather, it's an effort to define what we would mean in a circumstance where the pledge had been stem wall. What would that visually mean along the frontage at least?
I think a diagram would help there. Because it seems to be a lot of confusion of, what an actual stem wall looks like or slab type would look like.
It's in keeping with the rest of the LDO.
Yeah, because there's
Yeah,
lots of
going with the
diagrams.
illustrations. Yeah.
Okay. We can work on that. For proposed amendment 11, this is one we've been talking about for a long time. The proposed amendment would reduce the TIA threshold in half. Right now, our threshold that requires a traffic impact analysis is 100 or more peak hour trips or 1,000 daily trips. So the proposed amendment states that the threshold would be 50 peak hour trips or 500 daily trips for a TIA. And also, we're proposing to add a note that an access, location, and design review for all projects would be required, like a trip generation letter, access points, and network design. So there'd always be something to look at. And you would see if you're falling under those 50 peak hour trips, it might say, we have 30 trips and here's where they're going. Just that there'd be something for you all and our town board to see.
Yeah, I agree with the more development, we need more impact now, because that's the biggest
Bigger, yep.
lane is traffic and how much this new house is gonna cause traffic, so I agree with that.
Agreed.
Same, agreed.
And like I said, I know we've been talking about that one. Proposed amendment number 12 is about connectivity, street connectivity. So right now, our ordinance states that streets shall be interconnected and connect with adjacent streets external to a subdivision and provide multiple routes for pedestrian and vehicle trips. So multiple means more than one, but other than that, I'm not quite sure what it means. So the proposed amendment text would include saying you have to implement access points as recommended by your TIA, and you must connect to existing and planned street stubs.
That too. I thought that was already in there, I guess, I didn't know that
too.
wasn't.
It's not clear.
With providing multiple routes for vehicle trips, was if they stub to an adjacent undeveloped property, does that count as providing a multiple additional route? I mean, knowing that most things will be eventually developed?
I would give somebody credit for that if, knowing it would come in the future.
Mr. Lawrence can correct me on this, but I believe the fire apparatus access road appendix to the building code requires actual access unless the code officer determines that future access is likely.
Correct. With that connector street having a T intersection.
Right. So you'd have to have two real ones if that were determined, or you could get by with one upon a determination by your LDA or whomever makes your determination. Could be your fire chief or fire marshal, although I don't know that they're positioned to know what the future brings. So I think it's typically your LDA may make a determination that it doesn't have to exist at the beginning. And the town has not adopted Appendix D, so it's just it's a resource that's out there, but I don't believe that the town has adopted that. Do you know?
I don't know. I don't either.
Okay.
I think so. Okay. Proposed amendment number 13. Right now, in Chapter 11 of our LDO, the only interpretation authority that is mentioned for the land development administrator has to do with use interpretation. So the proposed text would be adding the authority for the land development administrator to make general interpretations. And I had learned before from a town attorney that that's pretty typical to have that general interpretation statement there.
That is entirely an oversight. The LDA has to be able to interpret the entire LDO.
Great. And number 14, in your packet, you got a complete marked up track changes version of Appendix A of the LDO. You didn't necessarily have to look at it. I think the big part of what's going on in the proposed changes in Appendix A has to do with focusing the town board on setting policy. That means focusing the town board's efforts on LDO amendments and rezonings, what's happening on the front end, what is our framework? And then making the shift so that the Board of Adjustment is acting as the judicial body reviewing findings for decision-making. So the big change there is moving special use permits from the town board to the Board of Adjustment. And at the town board work session on September 20th, we went through this, and there was support from the town board to make these changes.
So is the Board of Adjustments actually back in, is there actually a Board of Adjustments at this
Active.
time? There is? Okay.
I know there's still some openings.
We have some vacancies. We have 3 members right now.
Okay.
And we're working on setting a meeting date. We expect to need them in November.
7 members overall, or how many?
I think it's just
5?
5.
I didn't know
For
it
sure
was
it's
back
5.
in active status, I guess, if you will. But okay.
I have 3 people who are excited, which is to me, a great start.
You mean 3 additional?
No, 3 people who are
now.
stay-in members. We haven't put the call out for others yet. But I think having 3 people who want to stay involved is a great start.
I agree with this one, too.
Okay. So staff recommends approval of the 3rd round of LDO amendments. And I made notes on which ones were no's and which ones were wait, might need a little more, and I'm happy to go back through that, if that would be helpful with making a motion. I wrote down that proposed amendment number 1 was a no. That is putting townhomes as an allowed use in residential medium, so that one got a no from you all. And for amendment number 5, the item about requiring landscape plans be prepared by a landscape architect, et cetera, that we need to wait on that one and do a little more work. And then also maybe we don't need it because we think that the amendment number 8 about the plant palette will be helpful. And also wrote down amendment number 10, the foundation types. We may need to wait on that one in order to allow time to create and review a diagram or illustration to go with that. And I think otherwise we are good to go.
Get your motion on that one?
Ready for a motion?
How do you do this one? Let me figure out. Yeah, I was recommend that we approve the amendments to the LDO with the exceptions of the before mentioned items.
Okay.
Is that close?
Works for me. If the town attorney's good with it, I'm good. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please give me an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Moving on, communications, planning director's report.
And you know what? I did not prepare a report this evening because I thought our meeting was going to be really long, but I will introduce you to someone who's here. This is Jordan Prince. He's our new planning development specialist, and we're very excited to have him on staff with us.
Does he have a horticulture?
Welcome.
No, but Eddie Henderson in our Parks and Rec department does.
What was the title again? Yes. Oh.
For Jordan,
Development Support Specialist.
Welcome.
Welcome, Mr. Prince.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
What exactly will the development support
Specialist.
person do?
So, kind of a mixture of things. So, my primary job is to permit residential, commercial permits coming through email, through our Wake County Permit Portal, as well as assist Shelley on. She's trying to move with planning, some planning things, some administrative things with invoices with our various, I guess, third parties we use for, the planning review or for our engineering, things like that. So I have a little mixture of things. I'm working with Meredith, working with Mike, working with everybody to kind of help out when needed.
The infamous other duties as required.
Yep.
Correct.
Other duties that are.
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you.
thanks for hanging out with us.
You're welcome.
That is all I have, unless
That's
you
it
all
for
have any general questions.
I did have one question for you. He mentioned, invoices from the third-party reviewers. Are y'all actively looking for additional plan reviewers to not subcontract out the map reviews to Withers any longer?
That is one I mentioned in our our budget cycle sort of kicks off in January. And I would like to look at hiring a planner, another planner for our staff who could focus on plan reviews so we could do our LDO review in-house. It's tough right now with the number of staff we have. We still could use a little more.
Mm-hmm. All right.
But if we can get another staff person who would be a plan reviewer, then we would likely stop the contract with Withers Ravenel to do what they've been doing.
Thank you.
Brings us to the town attorney's report.
The only thing I have, Mr. Chairman, is that it has been passed to me by board members that they appreciate the supporting information that the planning board can provide that accompanies your vote. So if there's a vote that is, regardless, unanimous or, 5 or 6 to 1, the question that comes up at every single meeting is, well, what did they say about it before they had their unanimous vote? Or what was the concern of the one person who voted no? So please do not feel like that's sort of lost. And in fact, it's something that the staff is going to incorporate into the staff report. Other communities actually have a planning board report, which I don't think we're going to force upon the chairman right now. But as some folks know, in Raleigh, the chairman of the planning commission comes forward and delivers a report as to everything that transpired at the planning board meeting. We're not to that point, but we have been asked. I was asked to pass along to you more than just 7-0. Well, it was 7-0, and then the question is, well, how long was the meeting? Oh, they discussed it for about 30 minutes. Okay, what was said? And we don't really have that. So please feel like if there's something that you want to be reflected in the staff report, raise that and the staff, and we're all going to try to do a better job for the Board of Commissioners.
Who do you communicate that to? You said staff. Is there?
It'll be. I guess it would be whomever is the presenting staff person at the planning board meeting. Yeah. So whether that's Mike or Meredith or someone else.
Good to know.
Okay. That's it.
Like I said, I didn't ask for that, so it didn't have to just be any one particular person. But, you know, people are busy.
I mean, you're reporting back to the board on behalf of this board, so you're looking at another person in between?
I was just suggesting somebody from the planning board to do that. I mean, I can say something really quick, and which I usually do, and then when Meredith speaks, she speaks on more items as well, but never on the one or two or three people or why everyone said yes or no. It doesn't typically come up when everybody says yes, but I know in the past, it was like, how did this happen? What were some of the conversation that had taken place? But this is before Meredith. We had a lot more of those type of questions.
Can draft minutes be included in the package for the board, for the town board?
I know that that was discussed. I would defer to Meredith on the timing. Remember, we had a timing question about when we have the meeting versus when the particular case is heard. But when the planning board liaison speaks, that's during liaison reports at the beginning of the meeting, which is before any particular case is before the planning board. So it would be better for the commissioners to have in their package any comment that was a sentiment of the planning board at their fingertips along with that case.
Either very positive, negative, or contrarian vote.
Any comments except for yours was actually what I heard. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
I think, you know, I'm just saying, as somebody on the town board, I think part of that was sometimes the town board felt a little lost, especially when you all may say yes about something and then the board says no, and then there's conflict. Like how? What have we not seen that you all saw? So sometimes it would help to have that extra piece of, that little nugget as to what brought you to that decision. But for the most part, we're like,
Just
good.
kind of related to that, are we almost out of UDO things that would restrict what we could pass on to them?
Right.
Because that's been an issue too.
We're getting close. We just have a couple things left. I think I definitely see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay, good. Because there have been one or two times when I know, Commissioner Medley, you've wanted to ask, and we couldn't talk about it at all because, you know, you were going to be in a quasi-judicial scenario.
We believe the LDO has fixed all those circumstances, but you're absolutely right, and that's an excellent point, Mr. Chairman. The way Rolesville's culture between its planning board and its board of commissioners arose is related to how many of our items were quasi-judicial. So even if while the fact of your vote could be passed along, the reasonings for your vote would not have been sworn testimony, and therefore whatever happened here couldn't be passed to the board.
Yeah.
That's right.
Any other business?
I'd just like to say, hopefully tonight is a good representation that the LDO is working, because this is about the least amount of opposition to any plans, commercial subdivision or anything that we've had in a long time.
I said it was by design. It seems to be working very well, so I agree.
Great. I did forget to share one thing. I've shared this with Mark. Renata has resigned from the planning board, and I told her we would absolutely miss her expertise, and so we'll have a vacancy we'll need to advertise for.
Just know that she moved, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't anything, it's not that she didn't like us.
Is she in
We
town or ETJ?
we will miss her. I mean,
Where's-
definitely.
No, she's not ETJ at all.
In town? Okay.
Yeah, she was behind the villages, what is that, Carlton Point?
Well, I mean, we know people, obviously, and when there's an opening, I mention it to some folks if they're interested to give you a call, but
Please.
I wasn't sure if it ETGA people or if it was in town
I
people.
guess in time, because you and Steve are ETJ, right?
And me.
And you, Mike? Okay, so we have three.
It's
okay.
4 to 3.
Okay, so we need one more in town.
Pass the word.
Ready for last item of the evening?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion for adjournment. Is there a second?
A second.
We have a second. All those in favor of adjournment, please signify with an aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
My position.
Good job.
Somebody else, I think
job,
it was
team.
Wait, no, it was the Wake County.